backstory to that is that I'm an entertainment writer, so I've been a journalist all my life, and I write all the time. So I would say, I'm going to write a book. I'm going to write a book. I wrote a screenplay in my 20s and never did anything with, and then I would, go back and write 5 columns. And then so it was, I never really was committed enough to any of the fiction that I tried to write to actually do anything with. And I would always take it to my friend Scott Iman, who was our books editor, who is a pretty famous Hollywood historian. He's done a lot of stuff for Simon and Schuster. And I would go to his office and I would say, here's a chapter. And he would go, are you going to finish it? I go, no. And he said to me, you will write the book and finish the book that you have to finish. So the day that my Scott died, Scott Iman was in my kitchen with his wife. And I just said to him, blurted out, I think this is my book. And he said, kid, I think it is too, sadly. Who knows? Because when you're in a grief situation, you say things, you don't know. I'm sure I said lots of things that, I didn't mean, but I meant at that moment that I knew that I needed to do something meaningful with it. And the only thing I really knew how to do was write. So I literally felt like the words were like on my chest and I needed to get in my chest like the alien. And I needed to get them out of my chest and let them breathe. And then once I had a more clear sense of what day it was and who I was, about a month later, I just started writing. The first chapter you read is the first thing I wrote, being in the cemetery there the day after Scott died. And I just started writing. And that chapter, I understand, feels very raw. And it is because it was just the first thing I needed to say. And then it just came from there.
That's amazing. I mean, so in a lot of ways, the book is your own processing.
Oh my gosh. So much so. And I would say it's free therapy, except for that I also paid to go to therapy, but it was a free therapy in addition to the therapy that I did.
Yeah. Your title puts your race front and center. How and why did you make that decision? And why is your race important to this story?
Well, here's the thing. I think that when we talk about race in this country, we still think of white as the default. Sheryl Sandberg didn't have to say that she was a white woman when she wrote Option B because everyone knew. And Joan Didion didn't have to say, and I'm a white person. Because what you focus in for those stories, which are both amazing stories about widowhood, are about, they're two people that were already well known and very wealthy. And so Joan Didion's process, a lot of it is the wife of a famous person as a famous person, and her class and sort of the way that it's dealt with things and the sort of rarefied, society that they were in and the sort of literary tradition that they were in. And she's also a white person. And it would have been difficult for there to be a person who was also African American to be in that group, in that age group, without it being a thing. You know what I mean? It's just the way that's how it was. Same thing kind of with Sheryl Sandberg. I think that it was important for me to note my race, because I am a Black person. I'm not the Black person or the Black woman. There is no Black experience. There are Black experiences, just like Joan Didion's experience and Sheryl Sandberg's experience are very, very different, as are Patton Oswalt's experience or Rob Sheffield's experience or Timby Locke's experience, who also is Black. Timby Locke and I are both Black women who married white men who lost them and wrote books about them. And our stories could not be more different. And race is important in her story because she meets her husband, who's an Italian chef, and his family doesn't really into it at first because of the racial and American parts of her. And then when he dies, it becomes sort of a travelogue that she moves to Italy with her child to get to know not only his family and get her child to know his family, but to have an experience recalling how they met. And that's how race and culture impact in a very different way. We were a Black kid and a Jewish kid from Baltimore. There was nothing super exotic about our story. We didn't go anywhere that cool. But being of different races and different religions, I think, is interesting, but it's not the whole story. It's part of who we were, and it's interesting who we were. But as I explain in the book about sort of my backstory, my life is different because I experienced my life as a Black woman born in 1971, child of civil rights people, going through life, sort of the first generation after that era. That is important about who I am. It doesn't color everything I do or everything I say. I don't think about being Black every day or whatever. It's just who I am. Just like being Jewish is who someone might be, or being white or Greek or Asian. It filters through how the world sees them and how they see the world. And rather than pretend, I had an editor, and it's in the book. It was something that very early in my career at the Palm Beach Post, where something was happening and I wanted to write about it, but I didn't want to be like the Black reporter. And he said, "Leslie, I think they've noticed." And I went, okay, good point. And so I bring these things up when they are important. Like I said, every part of my book is not white. And then Blackly, I blacked the thing. But it's important to note that everybody in society, everybody in this world is changed or affected by parts of their identity. And I think that's beautiful. I think that when people say not to see color, it's stupid. Because when you say you don't see color, you're negating a part of me that's important to me. What I want you to say is, you don't see that my color makes me worse than you, or that your color makes you better than me, and that there is inherently no value or judgment based on what those colors are, that we're all equal. And that's a beautiful thing, because we can learn from that. That's a lot more honest than saying you haven't noticed that I'm Black.
That's very interesting. You know, I tell this story of I was with my daughter in this store, and she was very young, and you know, kids will just say whatever's on their mind, totally unfiltered, right? And someone wheeled by us in a wheelchair, and she said out loud, "Why does that person use that chair? Or why, you know, what is that?" And started asking me questions. And I thought in that moment, what should I do? So instead of I didn't want to go shh. So instead I went up to the person in the wheelchair and said, "Could you explain to my daughter why you use this chair and how it helps you?"
Wow.
And we formed such a bond, you know, by acknowledging what is. And, you know, it does become a beautiful thing. So the title is really acknowledging yourself, you.
And it's funny. And I think that
and it's fun.
It, to me, using the title Black Widow says either this is a sociological treatise about the way that different races grieve, which it is not, or it's someone trying to be funny. And I think that and the subtitle, I think, really set the pace, because people don't know what to expect when you say this is a grief memoir. They go, "Oh Lord, is it going to be sad?" And yes, it's sad. Death is sad. And death is not funny, but things surrounding your life can be funny or absurd or kind of funny in an awkward way. Hold on a second. Hey! Hey! Stop it! Pardon me.
That's great.
So yeah, I didn't want it to be, it's not like funny, haha. Like funny, it's not funny like farce, slip it on a banana peel, you know, into a casket kind of a thing. But it's also, everyone said to me, I read the book, I laughed in the first page and I cried 3 sentences later, and I thought, what are you doing? It's like, that's what life is to me. I think life is very, it's like there's a reason that like the comedy and the tragedy masks, the only thing different about them is their mouth. You know, the way that it's, because the strong emotions teeter-totter very quickly. And I think it can be a source of tension, and it's how you break it either way, I think, that makes it either funny or not.
Right. Those are great points. Now, you and Scott met in 9th grade, right?
Yes.
And then, but you didn't date until much later?
Yes.
Okay. Could you share?
He, and there's the smoke alarm. Smoke alarm! Oh gosh. Anyway, you know, kids. So That's my mom making chicken. So we met ninth grade in Baltimore, and we knew who each other were, but we weren't really friends. And we just were in classes together. I know I had 2 classes with him my freshman year. I think I may have had a class with him my junior year. And we didn't run in the same circles, but everybody gets to know each other. And then he went to college with my twin sister. So she would say, "Hey, do you remember Scott?" And I would go, "Yeah, whatever." Whatever. So I didn't think about him for another like 15 years. And then when our class was getting a reunion together, he friended Lynn first, and he friended me. And he said, "Hi, I'm in South Florida a lot. I used to live there. I might move back. Can I take you for a drink if I come back?" And I was like, "Okay." So I was I think I dated like how many ridiculous? I had several ridiculous relationships that year alone. At least two ridiculous relationships.
And those could be separate books.
Right? And then I was pretty fried by that point. So when he came back around November, he said, "Do you want to have a drink tomorrow?" And it was my mother's birthday. It was December 1st. And I went, "Okay." And I wasn't expecting anything. And he walked in, and I still didn't know, but his smile was so nice, and he was obviously nervous, and he had beautiful eyes. And I thought, I remember this guy. I remember, that he was funny and smart. And we just sat there for 2 hours and ate crab soup. It was at a seafood place called Boston's on the beach in Delray Beach, Florida. And when he drove away, I thought, I like him. And I thought, no, I don't. Shut up. You're stupid. Don't say that. It took him a couple months to kind of make his point, but I knew it was something immediately. I didn't know what it was, but I knew it was something.
Sometimes you just feel it, or it in your heart. Your heart knows it sometimes before your mind even. So.
I believe that.
So through the process of writing and revisiting all your memories, did it change your relationship to your grief and as you wrote the book? And
that is such a good question. Oh, come on. It really is. I think that it did, and I think that's part of the therapeutic nature of the writing working. Mm-hmm. Because as a writer, you're always processing. My sister's an actor, so I can say this. When actors talk about their process and they're, physically keeping touch with where they are in their process and stuff, I think writers, are more cynical about that, so they kind of roll their eyes about it. But they do the same thing. Journalists, we do the same thing. And as I began to write different things, I'm still a journalist at heart, so I still have a very analytical thing about, if I'm writing about someone else, how are they feeling? What are they feeling? How can I interpret this through things I understand? How do I not put myself into it? That sort of thing. And am I doing too much? Is it too much about me? Is it not enough about me? Whatever. And so I think that when I was processing my grief through this, most of the time I would just write it. I think as a writer, if I try to write something, it goes very badly. If I say, and this is going to mean this and say this and do this, it fails miserably because I'm trying too hard. And you have to kill your darlings, as they say, and crumple it up and shoot it and keep moving. But I think that I would write something and I would read it back and I would say, okay, how does this make me feel? Does it bring up things about my grief? Is it hard to do? Like, for instance, the first chapter, I just kind of, with some edits kind of out, because that was the most raw. The chapter about Scott in the him dying in the emergency room was the hardest, as you might imagine. That and a couple of the adoption chapters, just because they were so detail intensive, but that particular one, because this is where it began. This is the DNA of the grief, when I didn't even have a word for it, because I was still in shock. And my brain, there's a part where I talk about how, and I remember this kind of being out of my body, where they hand me the bag with his watch in it, and I think he's going to need it. And then I think, no, he won't. And I write, "Sweetheart, it's okay, sweetheart, you'll catch up." And that was sort of like all at once trying to check in. Who am I? Where am I? And reading that back took me right back to that moment. And I thought, this is going to be the hardest thing for people to read. And I was like, good, because this is what I want. I didn't want it to be torture, but I wanted them to be in that moment. And it helped me get a sense of where my grief was, because I wasn't there anymore. You know, every time I read it back, I was a little more removed from that point. I was a little more removed from the rawness of it. I could still feel it, because I was reading it again and imagining myself in those places, but it didn't hurt the same. And so that was really good for me, I think.
What do you hope that this book will do for others who are going through grief? You brought people along for your journey. What do you hope is the takeaway that others will get from this?
I truly hope that people understand that it's okay to talk about grief. And I've said this before, but we as a society feel like we can talk about anything. We can talk about our sex lives. We can talk about our past lives. We can talk about our childhoods. We can talk about so much, and we sort of pat ourselves on the back that we are progressive enough to be honest. But the one thing we can't talk about is grief. It's a thing that we struggle with. We have someone else write a card for us so we can just sign our name to it and hand it to them. And a lot of it is that it makes us uncomfortable because it reminds us that we might lose someone.
And
it
also,
reminds us that,
yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, it just reminds us that we're very close to those things. So I want people to be able to have a more easy conversation, an honest conversation about grief. I want people to be able to say, it's okay for me to admit that I'm sad, and not have it be about you and how you feel about it. It's okay for me to grieve at my own pace, either longer than you think I might because it makes you uncomfortable, or faster than I might because you don't know why I want to date, or I want to take my ring off, or why I want to move, or why I want to change jobs, or why I want to not have a shrine to my partner. I want people to be able to be honest about it, and for people to not have to feel, and this is big, and I don't know if you have this experience, but everyone I talk to about grief, no matter who they've lost, has talked about a moment in their mourning, and the difference between mourning and grief being the inward expression, mourning being the outward expression of that grief, that during your mourning, you will find a person, either it's a relative or just someone in the grocery store or whatever, who knows about your loss, who are what a colleague of mine called gushers. Do you know what I mean? Where they see you and they go,
yeah,
ah!
yeah,
and you're going,
yeah.
oh, for God's sake,
yeah,
because because you
yeah.
feel like, I was feeling really good today, and my earrings matched, and my teeth are basically clean, and I don't smell that bad, and I'm functioning today, and I'm okay today. And you're in now this weird place where you have to not only acknowledge your grief, but then you have to help other people feel better about your grief, which is so unfair. And so I want people who are not grieving to say, how do I greet people who are grieving? How is my relationship to other people's grieving really about me? And how can I change that? How can I not put my expectations about what I want other people to do, and how am I putting what I did when I was grieving on them and expecting them to follow that script when they don't know me, and they don't owe me that. I just want to get a conversation started.
And I think a lot of people also, they don't know what to say. So to comfort the other person, and that's the hard part for friends and family. You don't always know the right thing to say or do.
No.
So what is the right thing? What do you think the right way to approach someone you love who's lost someone?
I think it really depends on who they are and how well you know them. I mean, I had at Scott's funeral, for instance, there was a friend of mine who never knew Scott that we just had grown apart, and I hadn't seen her in years. And she came with a mutual friend who's her best friend, who I had run back into right before Scott died. And she called me and said, we're coming. And I didn't know who we was. I thought she meant her and her husband. And this friend who I hadn't seen in ages, and it wasn't like the best dissolution of the friendship. But when I saw her and she just opened her arms and said, "I love you." And I have not seen her since. And that is okay. Because that moment, I am sure if I needed something, she'd be there, and she needed something, I would be there. But it wasn't about having that day to day. It was just about this person saying, I don't expect you to say anything, be anything, do anything, open my arms, I love you. If you don't know people as well, sometimes it's like, sorry for your loss. I wouldn't do things that imply a relationship to, say, a spirituality that you don't know that they share or not, you know? That you don't say things like, well, they're better off with God because maybe they don't believe in God, or they don't believe in the God that you believe in, or maybe that's just not comforting to them. Mm-hmm. Don't say he's in a better place, or she's in a better place, or they're in a better place, because in the shock, when people said that to me 24 hours after he died, I was like, no, his better place is here in this chair with me. That's where he should be. And that saying that some all-knowing something knew better than me in that moment was hurtful to me, because I could still smell his body wash on the chair. So that's the place that he should be. And that's upsetting, and I'll hate you. Don't say that. Don't say that. I had someone who said, same kind of thing, Scott has completed his cycle around the sun. Same kind of thing, that they're trying to be profound. And it sounds like, oh, you mean it was the cycle around the sun? Oh, great. Now that makes so much sense. No. Better examples were, my cousin called. We're on the way to one of the funeral homes, and my sister held the phone up to my ear as I was driving, and she said, "This sucks." I went, "Yeah, it does." Because she knew me well enough to know that that's all I needed, was an acknowledgement of this. She likes Scott a lot, and she couldn't make heads or tails of it. Just coming from her was great, because she's my family. I had a friend, this is the funniest one. One of my cousins had actually a heart attack the day before Scott died, and she's fine. It was a mild heart attack, and so we were worried about her. And then, she wasn't allowed to travel or anything, so she couldn't come to the funeral. But she called me a couple days later, and she goes, "So how you doing, kid?" And I said, "Well, I kind of feel like in those movies where, like, someone dies and their mother or partner or whatever, like, digs them up and, like, makes a deal and reanimates them." And she said, once again, because she's my family and she knows me, said with a straight face, "What are you going to do with that? You can't take that to a party with you. You go to too many events. How are you going to cover a concert with a zombie?" And I just cracked up, because A, she's right. B, that's the way to approach it. So, I mean, that long-winded answer to say, if you don't know what to say sorry for your loss.
That's great.
I will say, someone said to me, and I hadn't really even thought of this, that when you say sometimes, "Let me know what I can do," if I can do anything, that sometimes that's not preferable, because what it does in certain moments is put the grieving person in the position of having to think of something you can do. And that you should not require anything of that person at that moment, particularly if it comes off unintentionally or not, like you need a reason to validate yourself and feel important, so they have to come up with something for you to do, because that's not their job to make you feel better. And I hadn't even thought of that, but someone pointed it out to me and went, yeah, that tracks.
Mm-hmm. We are recording this during COVID-19.
Oof.
We're all homebound right now. And I think in a way, people are comparing it to a form of grief.
Yes.
Temporarily.
Yes.
What would you say to that?
I think we grieve things that are gone, and whatever we had before this is gone. There will be a return to some sort of normalcy. We hope. We don't know what that is. That normal is gone. It is not coming back. Whether it's that we're going to get out of this months from now and all the restaurants we liked are closed down, or the economy's crappy, or that things that were accessible or possible or normal, like people wanting to gather in large groups of people, that's not going to no one's want to go to Coachella tomorrow. You know what I mean? All these things are not going to just bounce back. And I think that it is healthy to grieve, not only grieve the loss of the life that we had, the jobs that we had, the certainty that we had, the school that we had, the friends that we have, even if that doesn't involve actually losing people, which unfortunately so many of us are going to. I think also grieving things like those of us who were privileged enough to have thought we knew what was going to happen in the next week or the next month, grieving what we thought our future was, grieving what we thought where we were going to go on vacation, or grieving that I talked to a lot of people the first week or so after the shutdown who were getting married that weekend. And they had to grieve the loss of their wedding. And some of them were going to get married anyway. And then in the fall, hopefully maybe next January, have another ceremony, but it won't be the same. And sort of grieving the dream that they had. It's incredibly appropriate. And the sad thing is it's not finite because we don't know where this is going. And there goes the smoke alarm again.
Yeah.
We don't know where it's going to land. It's going to get a lot worse. We don't know if it's going to get better and worse or worse or better. We don't know, but we have to sort of grieving our sense of control, such as it is, I think is very important.
To me, I think also that grieving the loss of someone, the way it's different is that, to me, the hardest part about losing someone is that there's no hope left. In every other situation, there's hope for the future, hope that'll get better, hope that we'll get another job, hope. And the thing about loss to me is it's a loss of hope. It's a fact now. And
it's a fact.
That is what is so hard to deal with, is that it's the one aspect of life that you just have to find your own way to come to acceptance with it, whatever that is, whatever way you get there. And sometimes you might be closer to acceptance and you could fall back, but that loss of hope is what is so painful, I think, when you go through. So are there things that happen, signs or anything that helped you to get closer to acceptance? And also your use of humor.
I was about to say that I think that I've always processed things through humor. I've always written funny, or at least I thought it was funny. People told me it was. I assume it was. But I think that, once again, like I said, I did not set out to say, and I am going to write a funny book about grief. It's just the way that it came out. I also have a journalist's sense of, I don't know if fatality is quite as grim as I want to go, but at least of reality, that, you know, you grow up going to car accidents and covering deaths and funerals and stuff, and you sort of get your bubble that things don't happen to people and they won't happen to you is shattered very early on. And I think in a way, I mean, obviously I did not think I was going to lose my husband at that point, at that moment, but death was not an impossibility to me for anyone. I'd lost my dad several years earlier, 3 years earlier, and we both lost parents and stuff. So I think that there were things, sense of humor, the fact that I really didn't feel that I had a choice but to not get over it, but get through it, because I was the mother of a very young person who I needed to finish his adoption, and I needed to be able to function and literally hang out with him and drive him around and, you know, dress him and figure out where he was going to go to daycare and all that stuff, you know, so, you know, where he's going to go to school and where we were going to live. And those decisions, even though I co-parent with my mother, were now really on me. And I think that I was fortunate enough to have health insurance, so I had I could afford therapy and have my own credit and, you know, driver's license and car and things in my name, which a lot of women do not have, which is a whole nother thing about how privileged I feel I am as a widow, because I could start my life over again with an incredible crater in my heart, but I didn't have to ask anybody's permission to buy me a car, you know, or to move or whatever. I was able to make decisions on my own. So I think that humor and just a sense of purpose, kind of in like a kind of Meryl Streep kind of a way, you know, that kind of like, we have to do this and it's hard, very Sally Field, Norma Ray kind of, we got to get this done. So no time to cry right now. We got to move through it. And we'll cry later. I think that's everyone's process is different, but that certainly was helpful to me because I don't think I had a choice.
Mm-hmm. And also, I think there's a big difference being young and a widow or growing old together and experiencing widowhood, right? So the expectation for a lot of people is that you'll live your life together and you'll grow old together. And widowhood happens when you're older. Yes. The thing about young widowhood is you're not done life. You have a lot of living to do, right? So giving yourself permission to now move forward and live life, live your future, create your future. I have a good friend who was a young widow unexpectedly. And what would you say, how do you help other young widows to move forward and give themselves permission to move forward, that it doesn't mean less of a love of the person who passed, but it means moving forward, so, you know.
Okay, and this is not going to be Zen, but a lot of it comes with telling people shut the hell up and let you experience things the way that you're going to experience. I'm not talking about dating at the funeral. I'm not talking about, like, you know, spending all the insurance money on the pool boy. What I am saying is that when you are going to probably be ready to move on, whether that means changing your name, taking your ring off, moving, starting a new job, having a new life that even doesn't necessarily involve dating, you're going to be ready to do that before other people are ready for you to do that. And maybe it's family members who are still grieving and want things to stay the same. Or maybe it's just people who did things in a different era, in a different way, and want you to do them that way too. Or maybe it's just like nosy busybody people who need to get out of your business. Because I had that. People write me and say, well, you're moving too fast. I'm like, who are you? You know, based on, a lot of it was personal concern, but it was based on their own stuff. And it didn't have anything to do with me. And I think that you have to decide whose life it is. That, you know, we're not in the Victorian thing where you have to wait a certain number of years before you can take your veil off and before you can, like, show your hands and your arms and all that stuff. It's not any of that. It's more like, how do you feel? It's not like a Dateline episode where everyone knows the wife did it because she's sitting in the front row putting on her lipstick and, like, talking to her boyfriend. It's not like that. But it's like, when through therapy or counseling or religious training or whatever it is that you feel, I knew that it was time to take my ring off when I wanted to take it off. And now, right now, I used to wear Scott's ring on my thumb, and I don't wear it anymore. I do still wear my wedding band and this ring that I bought after, which is a long story. Second story, my original my engagement ring, the stone popped out, and he was supposed to replace it at Christmas, and he had died by then. So I bought a new ring with the insurance money. And I still wear that ring, but it's on my right hand rather than my left hand. So if you were to meet me, you would not notice that I had a wedding ring on, and you can't even see that was sad when the tan line grew back. That was super sad to me. And I thought, it is what it is. It happens. Just give yourself permission to feel and judge where you are and what you need and what you want. And those things might be different on different days. You might be ready to have sex before you're ready to be in a relationship. You might be ready to cut people connected with your old life who were always horrible to you out of your life. And that's okay. You don't need to have toxic people in your life. And I found, I'd say in the book, that I found that a weird feature, but a helpful feature of widowhood is that I became immediately and now still after, really unable to tell you not the truth. Like if people would say, like in those first couple moments, like, hey, do you want to go out? And I go, no, I don't. And I would just leave. And I didn't have an excuse, and I didn't come up with a reason or a thing to spare anyone's feelings because I felt so bad. I would just say, I don't want to do that. I got to go to bed now. See you later. And I would leave. And someone else would go, she's just very tired. She's very sorry. And they would explain. But I think that what that became is why do you always have to, women particularly, and those of us who are mothers particularly, feel that we have to put everyone else's needs before ours. And then everyone else's needs, everyone else's wants, everyone else's, I think I might want it, but I'm just going to ask you for it anyway. What we need and want are so far down, we haven't even figured out how to figure out what we want. And I think that giving people permission to deaden the noise and say, shut up, let me figure myself out, and not don't tell me what you need based on what you need, what I need based on what you need. I've met widows, for instance, who have said, my in-laws want me to move in with them and have my kids be with them, or they want all of us to only be in the same place. And I was offered a job some other place and they're fighting me because, it's complicated. They love the kids. The kids are a part of their, deceased spouse. And those things are very valid. But at the end of the day, what is it that you need? It's okay to be a little selfish, because I can't think of any other time that you can justify that more than when your husband dies.